Hello, welcome to the Cheater's Diary, where we share raw, real-life stories packed with emotion and unforgettable twists. If you love this video, hit the like button and subscribe to join us in spreading these meaningful tales. Now, let's dive into today's journey. Ethan Carter sighed as his phone buzzed. He just wrapped up a grueling work week, 5 back-to-back 12-hour shifts at the construction site. His hands were still caked with dust and smelled of fresh lumber. His dream weekend: a hot pepperoni pizza, an ice-cold beer, and a Parks and Rec marathon on the couch. But then his sister Julie called. Her voice crackled through the speaker, sweet but non-negotiable. "Ethan, Rachel needs help moving. You're free, right?" Ethan grumbled but couldn't say no. Not because of Julie, because of Rachel. Rachel Monroe, 36, sharp, stunning, and with a dry wit that demanded your full attention. She'd been Julie's best friend since their backpack-wearing college days. To Ethan, Rachel was the cool older sister of his childhood. He still remembered her slipping an extra chocolate chip cookie into his hand when he was 13, all messy hair and cracking voice. "Eat it, kid," she'd grinned, eyes sparkling. "Don't let your mom catch you." Then she teased him about his baby face, leaving him blushing for hours. Now, a decade later, Ethan wasn't that scrawny kid anymore. At 27, he was tall, broad-shouldered from years on the job, worn jeans, a dusty gray tee, and scuffed work boots. He wondered what Rachel was like now, still flashing that smile that made his heart race as a kid. Or had her divorce changed her? Julie had mentioned it in passing. Rachel had just split from her husband, a fresh raw divorce. Ethan didn't know much, but he knew enough to sense today wasn't just about moving boxes. He pulled up to Rachel's new place, a modest 2-bedroom bungalow tucked at the end of a tree-lined street. The porch sagged with wilted potted plants, paint peeling in patches. A moving truck sat crookedly in the driveway, half unloaded. Ethan parked, slamming his door shut. The sound echoed in the quiet Saturday morning air. He glanced at the porch. Rachel was there, perched on the steps. Her hair was tied up, a loose strand falling over her forehead. Sunglasses rested on her head. She wore a soft gray tee and denim shorts, clutching an iced coffee. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. But when she looked up and saw him, a faint smile crossed her lips. "Ethan Carter," she said, her voice soft but weary. "Right on time." Ethan climbed the steps, flashing a half smile. "I'm always on time when free pizza's involved," he shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. Rachel let out a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Pizza, huh?" she asked, standing and brushing dust off her shorts. "Not because your sister said I'm drowning in boxes?" Ethan tilted his head, pretending to think. "Mostly the pizza. Boxes are a side quest." She shook her head, her smile widening just a bit. In that moment, Ethan realized something. Even exhausted, with traces of tears in her eyes, Rachel had an effortless charm. It hit him like a quiet punch to the chest. He scanned the front yard. It was a mess. Boxes scattered near the truck, an old armchair abandoned by the fence. Rachel followed his gaze, sighing. "Welcome to my new life," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Gorgeous, right?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Needs some fresh flowers, maybe a coat of paint." She looked at him, mildly surprised, then nodded. "You're not wrong. But first, I need to get this stuff inside before it rains." They got to work. Ethan hauled the first boxes, his muscles flexing under his tee. Rachel directed him where to place them, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly as she pointed to the living room corner. He noticed how she avoided certain boxes like they held something she wasn't ready to face. He didn't pry, not because he wasn't curious, but because he knew now wasn't the time. Instead, he tried to make her laugh. "Ever think you'd be moving on a perfect Saturday like this?" he asked, carrying a box labeled kitchen stuff. Rachel glanced at him, smirking. "My perfect Saturday is lounging on the couch with a novel, not playing Tetris with these boxes." Ethan chuckled. "You should see me play actual Tetris. Neighborhood champ." Rachel paused, holding a small box. For the first time that day, her eyes lit up. "Neighborhood champ? You're the type to brag about random stuff, aren't you?" He clutched his chest, feigning hurt. "Random. Rachel, that's the peak of my career." She laughed, really laughed. The sound was light, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Ethan's chest warmed. He didn't say it, but he knew he wanted to hear that. Ethan nearly dropped it. It slipped, crashing to the ground with a thud. Rachel spun around, startled. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, but then she saw him scrambling to pick it up, checking for damage. "Sorry," he said, his face flushing. "Heavier than I thought." Rachel crossed her arms, stifling a grin. "You're a construction guy. Shouldn't you be able to lift the world?" Ethan smirked. "Only if the world's packed better than this." She shook her head, but her smile lingered. In that moment, a small connection sparked. Nothing grand. Just a second where they both forgot the weight of the day. Rachel sat back on the steps, clutching her half-empty iced coffee. Ethan joined her, keeping a respectful distance. He stared out at the street, where a few dry leaves skittered across the sidewalk. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. No pressure. Rachel gripped her coffee tighter, her gaze drifting. "I don't know," she said softly. "Everything's so new. This house, this life. I don't know where to start." Ethan nodded, not rushing to reply. He remembered his first bad breakup, the feeling of the world crumbling. He wanted to say something profound, but instead, he said, "You don't have to know yet. Take it slow." Rachel looked at him, her eyes softening. "You're wiser than I expected, Ethan Carter." He grinned, shrugging. "I've had a few years to practice." Rachel didn't respond, but she tilted her head, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not the kid from her past, but the man sitting beside her. In that moment, an invisible thread pulled them closer, though neither fully realized it. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up the small living room. Boxes were piled everywhere, some labeled books, others clothes. One smaller box read memories. Rachel avoided it. She pointed, directing Ethan to place a large box in the corner. "Over there," she said, her voice slightly hoarse. Ethan nodded. No questions asked. He noticed the tension in her movements. Careful, like she was walking on thin ice. He didn't want to crack it. They worked in silence. Just the sound of boxes scraping the hardwood floor. Ethan's steady breaths as he lifted a heavy one. Rachel busied herself cutting tape, organizing. But sometimes she paused. Her eyes drifted, lost in thought. Ethan didn't push her to talk. He knew her divorce was fresh, painful. Julie had filled him in briefly. A 10-year marriage. A husband who stopped laughing with her. Ethan didn't need details to know Rachel was holding herself together by a thread. "Need a break?" he asked, setting a box down. Rachel looked up, hair falling over her eyes. She tucked it back, offering a faint smile. "I'm good. Just more stuff than I expected." Ethan smirked. "You've got a whole museum here, Rachel," she laughed, but it faded quickly. She turned away, pretending to fuss with a box. Ethan kept moving things, but he noticed. Rachel was dodging something, and he guessed it wasn't just the boxes. Then it happened. Rachel picked up the small box labeled Memories. Her hands shook. She opened it slowly, like she feared what was inside might break her. Ethan paused, standing a few steps away. He watched her pull out a framed photo. Her eyes misted over. Tears glistened, but she held them back. "Rachel," he said softly. She flinched, snapped out of her thoughts. "I'm fine," she said quickly, her voice cracking. She set the frame down, face first, back in the box. "Just didn't expect to see this." Ethan stepped closer, not too close. He didn't touch her, but he stood near enough for her to know he was there. "You don't have to be fine," he said. "Not with me." Rachel looked at him, her eyes wavering. She wanted to say something, but she just nodded. "Thanks," she whispered. Ethan's heart tightened. He wanted to hug her, but he didn't. Instead, he grabbed another box, acting busy. "Where's this one go?" he asked lightly. Rachel pointed. "That corner." "By the window." They kept going. Ethan tried to keep things light. "You know," he said, hauling a box of books, "last time I moved, I swore I'd never keep this much stuff." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Then why's your bedroom still full of old Xbox games?" Ethan laughed. "Those aren't stuff. They're legacy." Rachel shook her head, a real smile breaking through. "You're such a nerd, Ethan Carter." He shrugged. "A little, but I've learned pineapple on pizza is a crime." She froze, feigning shock. "What? Pineapple's a crime?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "National offense." Rachel laughed hard, louder this time. They were nearly done. Just a few small boxes left. Ethan wiped sweat with his sleeve. accidentally flashing a glimpse of toned abs. Rachel glanced, then quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Beer?" she asked, her voice a bit rushed. She opened the fridge, grabbing 2 cold cans. "Thought you'd never ask," Ethan said, taking one. Their fingers brushed for a second. Rachel pulled back fast, like she'd been shocked. Ethan pretended not to notice, but a warmth spread through his chest. They stepped out to the back porch. The sky was turning purple. Crickets chirped softly. 2 cans hissed open. They sat on creaky wooden chairs, staring out at the backyard. Trees swayed in the breeze. Silence settled over them, but it wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, like a warm blanket. Rachel sipped her beer. "You didn't have to stay this long," she said quietly. Ethan tilted his head. "I don't mind. You needed help." She looked at him, her eyes softer. "You could be somewhere fun, like eating pizza and drinking beer at home." Ethan smiled. "My place doesn't have a porch like this." Rachel gazed out. 10 years, she said, almost a whisper. "I was gone 10 years. Now I'm back, and everything's different, except this porch." Ethan nodded. "Still creaks in the same spot, doesn't it?" Rachel smiled, her eyes brightening. "It does. You remember?" Ethan shrugged. "I remember a lot." She looked at him, curious, but didn't press. Instead, she said, "I thought leaving him would feel free, but it doesn't. It just feels empty." Ethan met her gaze, steady. "Empty doesn't last forever," he said. "You'll fill it, bit by bit." Rachel gripped her can tighter. She wanted to say something, but she just nodded. She stared out at the yard where the last light was fading. Ethan watched her, noticing the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Not from age, but from hard days. He wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, but he stayed quiet. He knew sometimes just being there was enough. "Rachel," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to do this all by yourself." She turned, her eyes flickering between doubt and hope. "You say that like you get it," she said. Ethan shrugged. "I've been broken a few times. Not divorce, but enough to know the feeling." Rachel nodded slowly. "Like the whole world's tilting, right?" Ethan nodded. "But it steadies eventually." They sat there as the last light vanished. Rachel stood, brushing her hands on her shorts. "I should start unpacking," she said, her voice shaky. Ethan stood too. "Need help?" She hesitated, her eyes scanning him. Then she shook her head. Stay a bit, okay? Just a little." Ethan looked at her. The porch light caught her hair, making it glow. "Sure," he said. "I'll stay." Ethan knocked on Rachel's door. It was 5 p.m. the next day. He held a small toolbox and an old vinyl record, its corner slightly worn. He hadn't been invited, but he showed up anyway. The door opened. Rachel stood there, her hair loose, soft waves framing her face. She wore an old college sweatshirt and black leggings. Simple, but it still made Ethan's heart skip. "Ethan," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" He held up the toolbox, smirking. "You said the kitchen cabinet was loose, right? I'm here to fix it." Rachel tilted her head, curious. "And the record?" He shrugged. "It needed a new home." She stepped aside, letting him in. The house was less chaotic. Boxes were unpacked, books lined shelves. A few candles flickered on the windowsill, casting a soft glow. Rachel led him to the kitchen. The cabinet under the sink creaked when she opened it. "See?" she said, tugging it. "It's like this." Ethan knelt, inspecting the hinges. "Easy fix," he said. "Just need some screws tightened." He got to work. The screwdriver turned steadily. Rachel stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. She bit her lip, like she wanted to say something, but stayed quiet. In the living room, a faint rustle. Rachel was opening another box. Ethan heard a soft gasp, small, but enough to make him pause. He turned. Rachel was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a framed photo in her hands. Her eyes glistened. Tears welled but didn't fall. "Rachel," he called, his voice low. She flinched, quickly wiping her eyes. "Sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't expect to find this." Ethan stood, wiping his hands on a rag. He walked over, sitting on the edge of the sofa, a small distance between them. "Want me to put it away?" he asked. Rachel shook her head. "Never I need to do it." She set the frame down, face first, but Ethan caught a glimpse. A wedding photo, a younger Rachel beaming. The man beside her, his arm around her waist. "I thought I was ready to forget him," she said quietly. "But then I see this." And it all comes back. Ethan leaned forward. You don't have to forget right away, he said. It's okay to hurt, Rachel. She looked at him, her eyes wavering. You sound like you've been there. He gave a small smile. Not divorced, but I've had my heart broken. I know what it's like when everything you built falls apart. Rachel nodded slowly. I thought we'd grow old together, she said. But then he stopped talking, stopped laughing. I didn't even know him anymore. Ethan didn't rush to respond. He let her words hang. The silence wasn't heavy, but gentle. Rachel gave a bitter laugh. Look at me, sitting on the floor, crying over an old photo, like I'm in some sad rom-com. Ethan tilted his head. You're not sad, you're just being real. She looked up, her eyes softer. You've changed a lot, Ethan Carter. He shrugged. Time does that. Rachel stood, brushing her hands off. Coffee? She asked, her voice lighter. Ethan nodded. Definitely. 10 minutes later, they sat at the small kitchen table. 2 steaming mugs, the scent of coffee mixed with the golden light from the window. Rachel stirred cream into hers, her spoon clinking softly. So, what about you? She asked. Still single? Ethan grinned. Yup, dated here and there, but nothing serious. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Why not? You're smart, kind, and, well, not bad-looking. She paused, her cheeks flushing. Ethan smirked. What would 25-year-old you say? She bit her lip, shaking her head. Forget I said that. Ethan leaned closer. I'm not forgetting, he said, his voice low. The air between them shifted, subtle but undeniable. Rachel met his gaze, her eyes flickering. Then her phone buzzed on the table. A text. She stood quickly, muttering, Julie, just checking on me. Ethan watched her walk away. The moment dissolved like smoke in the wind. Later, Ethan moved to fix a crooked picture frame in the hallway. Rachel stood nearby, arms crossed. Why are you really here, Ethan? She asked, her tone serious. He set the screwdriver down, turning to her. I told you, the cabinet. She shook her head. Why'd you come back? You could have dropped off the stuff and left. Ethan met her eyes. Because I wanted to be around you, he said, his voice honest. Yesterday, when I saw you on the steps, it looked like the world was tilting. I didn't want you to face that alone. Rachel blinked. Silence wrapped around them. Not awkward, but charged. Okay, she said softly. You win. Keep fixing stuff. Ethan smiled. Permission granted. She smiled back, but her eyes held something deeper. Just, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Don't try to fix my heart unless I say so. Ethan looked at her, his gaze gentle. I wouldn't, he said. Never. That night, as Ethan left, Rachel stood at the door. She watched his taillights fade. She hugged herself, her heart full of questions. But for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. Small, but enough to make her smile. Rain pattered softly. Ethan stood at Rachel's door, a small umbrella dripping in one hand. In the other, his toolbox and another old vinyl. He knocked lightly. The door opened. Rachel appeared barefoot in a cozy gray cardigan and jeans. She smiled, her eyes brightening. You really came through the rain to fix a shelf? She asked. Ethan smirked, holding up the vinyl. Shelf and tunes. I'm a multitasker. Rachel laughed, stepping aside. Come in, Mr. Handyman DJ. The house felt different, warmer. A blanket draped over the sofa. Candles glowed on the windowsill. A stack of records sat by an old turntable. Rachel pointed to it. I unpacked that this morning, not sure if it still works. Ethan knelt, checking the cords. One way to find out, he said. He turned a knob, plugged it in. Rachel stood nearby, cradling a mug of tea. The steam rose, mingling with the scent of old wood in the room. The turntable crackled. A classic rock song filled the air, warm and nostalgic. Rachel smiled. Where'd you find this record? Ethan looked up. My mom used to play it while cleaning. Thought it deserved a comeback. She nodded, sitting cross-legged on the floor across from him. Wine? She asked, holding up a bottle of red. Ethan nodded. I'm all ears. She laughed, pouring 2 glasses. They sat there, on the floor, the bottle between them. Music filled the space. Rachel sipped her wine. I never thought I'd be okay in a place like this, she said quietly. After the divorce, I thought every house would remind me of him, of what broke. Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady. And now? She glanced around, her eyes lingering on the candlelight. Now, Maybe home isn't a place. Not awkward. It's profound. Rachel tilted her head. Do you always show up at the right time like this? Ethan smiled. I try. She sipped her wine, her eyes drifting over him. You're so different now. Back then, you were the annoying kid trailing Julie. Ethan clutched his chest, mock hurt. Annoying? I was the neighborhood star. Rachel laughed hard. Right, with that messy hair and too much Axe body spray. He shook his head. That was style, Rachel. The rain grew heavier. Wind whistled through the window. They moved to the sofa. Ethan had fixed the shelf, but neither mentioned it. Rachel handed him another glass of wine. Am I hard to talk to? She asked suddenly. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Number, why would you think that? She bit her lip, staring into her glass. After the divorce, I realized I hadn't shared my feelings in years. I got used to staying quiet. Now I want to talk, but I don't know how to start. Ethan looked at her, his eyes kind. You're not hard to talk to, Rachel. You've just been around people who didn't really listen. She looked at him, longer than necessary. Then she turned away, her cheeks pink. You're dangerous, you know that? Ethan chuckled. Dangerous how? She didn't answer, just stood to grab another record. This is my favorite, she said. No judging. Nora Jones' voice filled the room, soft and melancholic. Rachel sat back down closer to him. Their knees touched. Neither moved away. She got me through my worst nights, Rachel said quietly. She's earned my loyalty. The air between them shifted, gentle but tense. Ethan looked at her, the candlelight flickering in her eyes. Why are you really here, Rachel? He asked, echoing her earlier question. She met his gaze, her eyes wavering. You already asked that. He leaned closer. Why do you let me stay? In your life? She took a breath, her fingers tightening around her glass. Because you had a crush on me, she said, her voice trembling. I remember you, the goofy kid with the big smile standing in Julie's backyard. But now you're here. Real. And I don't want to push you away. Ethan blinked. His heart raced. I did have a crush on you, he admitted. A big one, but you were always out of reach, like a dream I couldn't touch. Rachel looked at him, her eyes soft, vulnerable. I'm a mess, Ethan, she whispered. I'm older than you. I have baggage. I'm scared to open up again. He leaned closer. Everyone's a mess, he said. An age? I don't care. I just see you. She took a shaky breath, their eyes locked. The air felt electric, like before a storm. Rachel reached out, her fingers brushing his hand, light as a feather. Then she paused, like she'd gone too far. The record ended, the needles scratching softly. She stood, walking to the turntable. I should get to bed, she said, her voice unsteady. Long week. Ethan grabbed his toolbox, heading for the door. He turned back. Thanks for letting me stay, he said. Rachel smiled, tired but warm. Thanks for fixing more than just a shelf. The next day, Ethan returned. No plan. He brought a potted lavender plant and solar-powered string lights. Rachel opened the door, surprised. You're back? She asked, smiling. He held up the plant. For your porch. It needs some life. She shook her head, but her eyes sparkled. They went to the backyard. Rachel held a glass of wine, offering him one. Ethan strung the lights along the fence. When they lit up, Rachel gasped. It's beautiful, she whispered. Ethan smirked. You're easily impressed. She shot him a look. It's just been a while since anyone did something nice for me. They sat by an outdoor fire pit. Flames crackled. The sky glowed pink. Rachel stared into the fire. Ever feel like you're rebuilding your life from scratch? She asked. No blueprint, no guide, just you and the pieces. Ethan nodded. All the time. She talked about her ex. They met when she was 22, married at 24. She thought it was forever, but he wanted her quiet, small. She lost herself. I'm glad you left, Ethan said, his voice low. She looked at him, smiling. Me too. She stood, going inside. Ethan followed. She pulled a framed photo from a wooden box, the old wedding picture. I can't put it away yet, she said. I'm scared if I look at it, I'll cry. Ethan sat beside her. It's okay to cry, he said. She shook her head, but her eyes were red. He didn't want kids, she whispered. I wanted to be a mom. Ethan looked at her. You'd be an amazing mom. She smiled, wiping her eyes. Rachel made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Simple, but Ethan swore it was the best meal he'd ever had. They sat close, elbows brushing. Rachel asked, "Did you really have a crush on me as a kid?" Ethan laughed. "You wore leather boots and drove a convertible. I had a beat-up Civic." She laughed hard. "And now?" Ethan leaned closer, his eyes soft. "Now you're not just a crush. You're real." Rachel looked down, blushing. "You're gonna complicate things," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "I hope so." She stood, stepping closer. She kissed his cheek softly. "Thanks," she said. Then she walked him to the door. The string lights twinkled behind them. "Next week, same time?" he asked. She nodded, smiling. "Same time." 2 months passed. Rachel's house was truly a home now. The back porch bloomed with new flower beds. A wind chime tinkled in the breeze. A double swing swayed gently under the sunset. Ethan stood on the porch, paintbrush in hand. Rachel was beside him, her shirt speckled with pale yellow paint. They'd just finished the spare room, soft yellow, like morning light. Neither said it, but the room felt like a beginning, a quiet promise. Rachel wiped her hands on a rag, looking around. "I didn't think I could do this," she said softly. Ethan smirked. "You did more than you think." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "Not alone." Ethan set the brush down, sitting on the swing. Rachel joined him, their knees touching. Neither moved away. She held a glass of wine, sipping it. "Remember the first day you came?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "You were on the steps, looking like you wanted to escape the world." She smiled, her gaze distant. "I did want that, but then you showed up, with boxes and dumb jokes." Ethan laughed. "Dumb? I'm the neighborhood comedian." Rachel shook her head, but her smile stayed. "You know," she said, her voice quieter, "that day, when I asked you to stay a bit, I didn't know what I was opening the door to." Ethan looked at her, his eyes gentle. "And now?" She tilted her head, gazing at the lavender she'd planted last week. "Now I feel okay. Not perfect, but better." They sat in silence. The wind chime sang softly. The sun sank, painting the sky orange. Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder, lightly, like it was the most natural thing. "I was scared to start over," she whispered. "Scared to be alone. But you changed that." Ethan didn't speak. He just placed his hand over hers, their fingers lacing together. A small gesture, but it said everything. The next weekend, they went to a barbecue at Julie's. The backyard buzzed with people. Laughter rang out. The smell of grilled burgers filled the air. Rachel stood by the drink table, holding a lemonade. One of Julie's friends, hair in a high bun, asked curiously, "Rachel, how'd you meet Ethan?" She smiled, her eyes flicking to Ethan. He was a few yards away, joking with some kids, holding a paper plate. "He helped me move," she said softly. "Just a few boxes. But then I asked him to stay a bit." She paused, her eyes shining. "And thank God he did." Ethan overheard. He turned, catching her gaze. A smile spread across his face. He walked over, setting his plate down. "Talking smack about me," he teased. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Just telling the truth." She reached out, taking his hand. Their fingers locked tightly. The crowd didn't notice, but Julie did. She smiled quietly, sipping her wine. Rachel leaned close, whispering in Ethan's ear. "Thanks for staying again." He grinned, squeezing her hand. "Any time." The next morning, they stood in the bathroom. 2 toothbrushes sat side by side on the sink. Rachel brushed her teeth, toothpaste foam at the corner of her mouth. Ethan did the same beside her. She glanced at him in the mirror, her eyes playful. "Still want kids someday?" she asked, half joking. Ethan stopped brushing, meeting her gaze in the reflection. "I want a full life," he said. "With you." She smiled, her eyes bright. "Then we'd better start dreaming big." They left the bathroom, stepping onto the back porch. Rachel held a coffee mug, Ethan a water bottle. They sat on the double swing, looking out at the yard. The flower beds were in full bloom. String lights glowed in the early light. Rachel leaned against him, her voice soft as a breeze. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, "but for the first time, I'm not scared of it." Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady. "You don't need to know. We'll figure it out together." A week later, they were in the backyard again. Rachel planted more flowers. Ethan dug in the dirt, his shirt streaked with mud. She glanced at him, grinning. "You look like you rolled through a job site," he smirked. "This is style, Rachel." She shook her head, tossing a small clump of dirt at him. He clutched his chest, collapsing onto the grass. "You played dirty," he said, laughing. Rachel sat beside him, grass sticking to her jeans. "You started it."